So we're based on the North Shore of Cornwall. There's 20 of us, predominantly product designers and marketeers. But we specialise, and have done since our inception, which was 19 years ago. We just specialise in designing and making products from waste materials, but very specifically around the circular economy and circular design. So internally we have a rule of 100, 10, 100. So any product we design has to try and be 100% recycled content, at least longevity of around 10 years, and then 100% recyclable at the end of its life. And then we're structured in two very separate ways. So half of our business is around our own products. We design and make our own products and distribute them globally. And then the other half of the business is trying to help other brands become more circular. So primarily looking at a big corporate's waste stream. How do we turn that waste back into products that can go into their infrastructure? What inspired me, because we've been going a long time, I think when I set the company up, I was working for Dyson. And I knew, technically, even back then, 20 years ago, that we could be making products out of recycled materials, but they weren't for probably economic reasons. So when I left and set my own company up, that was the big pillar for me back then, was to try and make products out of waste materials. So we've kind of been ahead of the curve, I guess, and it hasn't been some 20-year miracle vision. It was just, internally for me, I felt that was morally the right thing to do, and technically it could be done. So that's kind of where it came from. But what drives us in the circular economy is that we believe, and specifically circular design, is a really tangible, doable solution to solving a lot of the environmental problems. We passionately believe in it, and we promote it wherever we can. Key challenges and how we've overcome them are quite interesting, because I'd say there's the classic ones, which we term classic, of probably a lack of infrastructure, a lack of material availability, especially when it comes down to food safe materials. That's a big challenge for us. Consumer mindset is another one, but actually there's some subtler ones that have actually probably been bigger challenges for us. One is what I term the linear establishment. So when we're working with big brands, we are seen as, I guess, the circular disruptors, the small company trying to do things differently, and you are up against a very established supply chain that work in a very linear fashion, as we all know. So that's quite a big blocker for us in terms of our progression. And then the other aspect is around the challenges of circular design, in that it's actually a systems approach. The old school way of designing, well, I call it old school, but most people are still designing like that. But the linear approach is relatively straightforward. You're designing a product, you're making it, you're putting it out into market, and you then never really have to worry about it again. Whereas the circular approach is a whole systems, where very often we're having to develop a collection system to get hold of the materials, right the way through to the whole supply chain, right the way through to a collection system again for us to take back the materials. So that design element isn't really design anymore. It's a massive systems approach that is complicated. But on the flip side of that, you end up with a far better product, because you're involving the entire supply chain within your whole thought process. And it comes back to collaboration. Collaboration is key. Circular&Co, the co is collaboration, because you won't progress as a business and as a circular economy without collaboration. So that challenge of this big supply chain sort of process feeds into collaboration, which I think we benefit from. Key successes I think there's a couple of things. One of them is we're really proud of awards that products have won, especially ones that are consumer based, like the Best Buy kind of award, and that showcases how high quality a circular product can be. I think there's this perception sometimes that they're going to be inferior because they're made from waste, whereas that proves they're not. So we're really proud of that. The second element is what we team Scale for Good. So a lot of the work we do, we're a small design-based company, North Shore of Cornwall, but we work with some huge global brands, and that's where we can get our Scale for Good, and that's really rewarding for us. We sit on boards of big companies looking after or implementing policies on circularity and reusables, and how they can infiltrate reusables into their whole supply chain. And that for us is incredibly rewarding, because we're hitting the scale then. commercial benefits from adopting a circular model has been vast for us in that we've been going 20 years, and since the world caught up and realised that the circular model wins on so many levels from an economic and environmental perspective as well, the phone has literally not stopped ringing. So I could go into details, but I'd say overall we've benefited hugely from offering this different approach, a circular approach, and very often it's a win-win for everybody. So whether it's doing it ourselves or for other brands, the product ends up superior, it's cost effective, it's often cheaper, and it's a great environmental message for them, and of course there's the environmental impact. So every time, whoever we're sitting down with, we're in this position where we can offer a win-win, and at the end of the day with business, that's primarily what we're all trying to do. So it really lends itself to that. In my opinion, in terms of the critical changes we need to make, one and I think it's going to be one that's mentioned a lot, is around infrastructure. We do need to have an improved infrastructure in terms of collection, processing, and then at the end of line, with the end of it gets to the end of a life of a product. At the moment, we're having to take that on ourselves, which I think is a good thing. I think there's producer responsibility where actually, if you put a product onto the market, you need to take that back, and I think that's useful. But you need the infrastructure to help you and enable you to do that in a cost-effective way. The other aspect, just quickly, is around what we term real-world recycling. I think one of the blockers is there are a lot of companies out there who want to be circular and believe they're designing a circular product, but they don't understand the real complexities or the reality of where recycling is within each country. So very often, I think a lot of greenwashing comes from just naivety. It's critical that businesses, any design agency, any design company, understands what's achievable in the real world, and there's a massive lack of that at the moment. The advice I'd give, anyone who runs a business, no matter what size it is, a successful business is one that can preempt where the market's going to go and be there at the forefront of it. That's primarily what you have to do as a business. And I cannot stress enough how in the next 5 to 10 years, the circular economy is going to boom. It's going to be driven by legislation, so it's coming. So I really do feel strongly that in 5 to 10 years' time, there'll be those companies that saw it coming, adapted, and wholeheartedly took it on, and then those that are just going to be left behind. So overall, as a big umbrella, I just urge everybody, any business has to be moving in this direction. If you're not, you need to urgently.